We can get this commentary. It's
Oh
pretty
yeah, it's actually great, right? How ridiculous can we?
Yeah. How old is he trying to use Zoom right now?
I know, right? I mean,
Like,
we know
good,
nothing
good.
about him, so we can only make assumptions right now.
Yeah.
So, Kim, if you can, in all seriousness, if you can hear us, for some reason you're on mute and off camera, so send us a chat and let us know what's up in the chat box, and then we'll know what to do while we wait.
If you can hear us, blink twice in your non-existing camera. Shut your mouth when you're talking to us.
You know what? Would you please respect your elders, Jane? How many times do we have to talk about this?
I'm trying.
Oh my
He's
God.
listened to the podcast, and if he hasn't, he's in deep trouble.
If he hasn't, he's in deep trouble, and he deserves whatever he gets right now. Because forewarned is forearmed. Somebody important said that sometime. I don't remember who.
Maybe you should text him.
All right, I will message him, because I think I did. I just shared my cell phone, but I don't have his yet. So let me go in there. Hi. We see you here, but no camera and on.
You knocking, but you can't come in.
That's right. That's right. That's right. All right, let's see what he says. I guess it's possible that he logged in and then walked away.
Maybe because
could be.
I was doing story time.
True. That's very true. That would scare anybody. Any and everybody would be scared by that.
Yeah.
This is very exciting.
Look at this air plant of mine.
There we How about now?
Hey. There you are.
Ta-da!
Now we can hear you.
Here.
How are you?
Not bad. Hanging in there so far.
Good. So just so you know, we I never actually got confirmation from Bruce. So I'm thinking we're thinking we might just go ahead with you and then have another conversation with Bruce. Because if for some reason he just hasn't been tracking our message string, then he messaged me separately when he realized he had missed something. And he was like, is it too late? I was like, no, this is what we're doing. This is the link. This is all the information. But then he never responded to that. So I don't want to have you text him right now, for example, and him scrambling.
Bruce.
That's
yeah.
I'm glad we're recording right now, actually.
Yeah.
Trash talk. We got to.
We'll have a sizzle reel on Facebook later today.
That's right. Hey.
Hey, I can trash talk Bruce. Yeah, well, so
you've earned that right.
But if you want to get him to do something like this, you need to call him on the phone and do him in person and say, we're going to do this in 5 minutes. And then he might be able to do it. Because if you say 5 days from now, okay.
Okay, that's good to know. All right, so when we come back, we'll come back to this. Actually works out quite well for us, Kim, because we can have a great conversation with you today, and then before this airs and he hears it, we can have the same conversation with him, and then we can compare your answers and see. It's like the dating game from back in the day, right? Yeah. And we'll see if you
except for it's called family drama and we're stirring the shit pot.
Exactly. So Kim, we're recording right now, but we're gonna just a second, we're gonna do our official opening. Before we do that, what we're thinking about in this first conversation and just getting to know you and all the things is we'll once we do the intro, I'll kind of start a timer on my end, so we'll be an hour or so. So we're not going to talk about all the things. We can't possibly get all caught up in the whole world of Kim and the Doxy family in an hour. But so we thought we would start with, if it's okay with you, just kind of are doing the quick intros among us, and then we're going to really maybe focus this first episode on some things about our dad, about Kurt, from your perspective, right? Like we've had lots of conversations about what our experiences have been. Of course, I've had no experiences with the Doxy family.
You're lucky.
Oh yeah. I'm turning my video off, by the way. My Wi-Fi just got wonky. So we're super curious about what was going on in the rest, not what was like all the details, but like from your lens as a brother, how much you were aware of, what you experienced in terms of, your brother Kurt's adventures, if you will, across 3 decades. So we don't know how far we're going to get, but that's kind of going to be where we start, if that's okay. And then we'll come to a natural close when we can in an hour or so, and then we'll pick up if there's a future conversation, if you don't hate us after.
Okay. All right. Whatever.
Whatever. I like it. So Jane, do you want to, well, I'll start the music, right? I've got the music. So I'll start the music and then give it like 10 seconds maybe. And then you can start the opening. Sound good?
Okay, sounds good.
All right, here we go. I lied. Hold on. I want to back it up to the back it up. Hold on. I'll tell you. Up, almost. And here we go. That's it.
There you go. You're listening to Dumpster Diving with
Janice
and Jane. And we have a special guest this week, or this episode, I should say. It's our good old Uncle Kim. Welcome, Uncle Kim.
Welcome. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much.
Now, for context, Jane, let's set it up really quickly for everybody else. For context, this is my very first time ever meeting and talking with our father's brother. And is that true for you too? Or have you met Kim before, Jane?
Oh, no. Yeah. Actually, the only time I don't remember ever meeting you, Kim, when I was a child, but I may have, but I don't remember. But the first and only time that I've been in Kim's presence is at Grandma's funeral in Washington, D.C.
Oh, wow. Okay. And how long ago was that?
That was in 2009. Yeah.
Okay. So it's been a minute.
Yeah, we had run into each other when you were living in Key West that brief time.
Yeah.
And I swung through town for one reason or another. I forget what it was. And I met you guys then.
Yeah. And I think I remember that because it was right around the same time as Bruce showed up, because I remember him taking Jason to Universal Studios, and it was a summertime-ish. And it was like, we were too little, and I remember briefly maybe meeting you, but it didn't, stick. So, but I remember meeting Bruce and Lynn.
Yeah, it was there on your grandmother's back porch.
Yeah.
One afternoon.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? I remember seeing a photo now. I remember because you were walking behind Jason and they took a picture, and I remember that now. So yeah, I do remember that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this will be a random tangent, but everybody's used to that now. So you said, Jane, just now, oh my gosh, I remember seeing a photo, and now I remember you were walking behind Jason and blah, 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 blah. And I just heard this great bit by a comedian who was talking about the difference between like the photos of our parents and what our kids are going to experience. And so it's the same thing, Jane, like, you're going to be able to show to your dollars, look at this picture, and that's who this is. And this is your uncle or great uncle in their case, Kim. And we were all in Key West and blah, blah, blah. Our kids 20 years from now are going to be like, look at this photo of this dinner that I ate. Oh, wait, here's a photo of me standing by myself in the bathroom, take a picture of myself. like, the great storytelling is over. Because my kids will also get, by the way, oh, and here's a picture of our cat, and here's a picture of our other cat. Yeah, it's going to be great. It's great. Anyway, I'm back. All right. So Kim, position yourself, if you would, please, for our listeners. And what I mean by that is like, we know we have early on in early episodes, said, okay, the Doxy family and the sons but not everybody remembers every word we say, which is hard to imagine, but evidently that's true. So position yourself in terms of like the Doxy family and where you fell in the order of birth and where you reside now, and just kind of some brief intro stuff.
All right. I was tail end Charlie as far as the boys go. Kurt was the eldest. He was born in 42. Bruce was next, and he was born in 44. Then came Jan, and he was in 47, and I came along in 49. And then 15 years later, we adopted Sabrina while we were living in Hawaii.
Okay.
And now, so you want me to go from there to where I am now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, okay. I'm now retired, and that's a full-time job if you haven't figured that out yet. And you don't get a day off. There's no holidays.
There's no
You
summer
are
break.
retired.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
no weekends.
And there are no weekends, nothing. And so I'm living in Tallahassee right now, by
Nice.
myself. My wife died back in 09. Matter of fact, grandma and my wife died about 3 days apart from each other. So
wow.
that we got to have one funeral. That was made it nice and easy for that. But so that was in 09. And other than that, what have I been doing here? As little as possible.
I love that. We can all aspire to a retirement that actually involves doing as little as possible. My husband is retired Navy, and he works for Navy contractors now, and so he keeps asking that question, like, how did I retire but yet I have a full-time job? And I'm like, babe, just keep going, you're fine.
Roll with it.
Hey, roll with it.
We have
Exactly.
goals.
It's all good.
Yeah.
It's all good.
When I retired from the Air Force, they still had that law in place that if you were an officer, you would lose half of your retirement pay if you went to work for the government.
Are you kidding?
What?
Wow.
No, I'm not kidding you. Yeah. And so I started down and looked at a couple of jobs that I was interested in and qualified for. And I said, I'm going to have to take a large amount of cut in my pay, my retirement pay. So they're not paying me enough to do that.
No
So I
way.
went off and
Yeah. Give up the free money in order to work for other money. That makes zero sense. I can imagine how. So you've been retired for how long?
since 94. So coming up on 30 years.
Oh, okay. You are not allowed to meet my husband because you will be a bad influence. So we're just going to keep you two away from each other for a little while. I'll let you know. Maybe like 10, 15 years from now, then you can have a conversation. But for now, we're going to keep. So you have 3 children too, right?
Go ahead.
Sorry, Kim. Yeah, you have 3 kids yourself, right?
Correct.
Okay, so run them down for us.
Okay. Michelle is the eldest, and she is 52 now. And she's living in just outside of Albuquerque.
wow.
She's got 2 kids and 2 grandkids. So I have 2 great grandkids. 3, excuse me. 3 great grandkids. That's right. It's hard to keep track of that. And then Monica is living up just outside of Springfield, Massachusetts, and she works for the VA. Shelley works from her place in Albuquerque. She works in Washington, D.C. remotely, which is kind of cool. Yeah, you can walk around in your fuzzy slippers all day long.
Oh, yeah.
Then Eric is, how old is he? Pretty old, 46, 47, something like that. He and his family are living in Spokane, Washington.
Oh, wow.
And they have 2 kids up there. Oh, and Monica has 2 kids.
And you said Monica's up in the Northeast?
Right, Springfield, Mass.
That's right. Okay. So I am actually then the same age as Shelley because I'm 52. So we were born somehow close to, or somewhat close to each other. Okay.
She was born in 71.
Yeah, me too. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, that's helpful. So, and once upon a time when I first met Dylan back last fall, it's almost been a year now. You may have seen it, right? He worked out the whole, like, as much as he knows based on 23andMe and family history and stuff, like the whole timeline of Kurt, if you will, right? So what we know is that he had children spanning 3 decades.
Yeah, something like that.
Amazing, right? And so I want to so it's helpful for me to hear you share again among the siblings, the Doxy siblings, where you fall, and then your own family, because they're just, when I think about the vastness of the number of people, right? And I've met obviously Jane and I and Devin, and I met Sarah. I had a chance to meet Sarah last fall. And of course I've met Jane's youngest kids. So that's kind of the scope. I'm following a lot of people on Facebook now and connected that way, but haven't, aside from you and Bruce, who've reached out so kindly, haven't, you know, had specific kinds of conversations or communications with folks. And honestly, for me, it's about like, you know, if and when people would like to do that, then they'll let me know, right? And I don't say that as in like, oh, you have to approach me first. I'm not 16 in high school, but more of a, I know for myself, at least my own, you know, understanding is like, I know I'm assuming from the family perspective, it was tough to keep track of all of Kurt's children, and we want to hear from you about that. But to my knowledge, I was completely unknown until Dylan made the connection with one of my daughters on 23andMe. So I just feel like there's this whole like, I don't want to upset anybody, right? So that's kind of how I've been taking it. And of course, I'm sorry, Dina, of course. Sorry, Dina. Sorry if you're listening. Sorry, I didn't mean to forget you. Yes, I've met Dina a couple of times, and of course she's wonderful and kind and so sweet. So anyway, so Jane, do we want to just start with like, so tell us about your view from those 3 decades, or do you have something else you want to jump in with? Because I know you two haven't had a really close connection with Kim.
Yeah. I mean, I'm here for the ride, so wherever you want to start, Janice, that's fine with me.
So let's do it, Kim, if you're good with that. Like for us, I think we're super curious about, like, we've had some really intense conversations, and I don't know how much we don't know how much you've listened to all of our episodes, but we always like to assume everybody listens to all of it. But we've had some intense conversations about our own experiences, right? And Jane, of course, had some experiences immersed in the Doxy family, lots of experiences detached from the Doxy family. And so we're just kind of curious, like across those 3 decades, right? What else was kind of going on in the Doxy family, or how aware was everybody, or in tune was everybody in terms of like, as the kids were coming along and their different family groups and that kind of thing, like just that whole perspective. So pick it up from there and whatever you'd like to share.
Well, Kurt left the home when he joined the Air Force back in 1960. And so my upfront face-to-face experiences with him were kind of spattered, but he always kept in touch with Mom. And so that was 1960. I was just, what was I, 9, 10, 11 years old, something like that.
Right.
And then, but we sort of kept track of what he was doing with his first wife, and then his being sent to Alaska. Gosh, that was fun. And then him coming back and joining the Navy and hooking up with Dolores and all that kind of stuff. And while he
question, you said he was sent to Alaska. What was that about?
That was about 1963, I guess. He was a weatherman, a weather guesser, and he they sent him to a little weather station on top of Sparvan Mountain in Alaska. And he wasn't real happy with the thing. There were 3 guys up there, and they were up there alone, and they had a base camp down at the bottom of the mountain. But during the winter, which goes from about the 1st of August until about the 1st of July, the next year, he was stuck up there on that mountain.
Can we pause you real quick, Kim? Can we pause you real quick? What the heck? He was a weatherman? I didn't know that. Like, Janice knows nothing. I know very little, and I only know what my wonderful mother has told me. And so I had no idea what his MOS was or whatever. And so, and knowing the fact that he loved women so much, being on a mountain with 2 other men was not what he wanted to do. That makes me giggle.
It was, yeah. Yeah, he did not have a real good time up there. And he didn't, he got himself in trouble a little bit up there. But, when you're one of the junior guys and you get some jerk who's in charge of the operation, he didn't get along. So, but anyway, and then he got discharged. When he got discharged, he went. Before he went into the Air Force, of course, he married his first wife, I don't remember what her name is. And then he came back and they divorced. And then he wasn't doing well as far as John finding substantive employment. So he went back in the Navy. And he went back in the Navy as some sort of administrative clerk position or something like that, because he could type pretty fast. And he could use the English language functionally. Being in the Navy, that's an advantage. So anyway, that's what he did. And he was bounced around on a boat for a couple of years. And he was married to Dolores at that time. And we were at Quantico, Virginia. So I was in high school at that point. When he was in Alaska, we were in Hawaii. So, I could say, nanny, nanny, boo, boo. And at him. Yeah. And that, just coincidentally, that in '64, when that big earthquake hit Alaska, they got banged around quite a bit up there on top of that mountain.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he said that was a pretty exciting experience. But anyway, so he left there, joined the Navy, sailed around for a while, and then came back to Virginia. And after he got out of the Navy, and still could not find substantive employment in that area. Kurt was always looking to score the big job, the big paycheck. And the idea of starting in at the ground floor and working your way up was just not his style. And so he packed up, and he told me once, he says, Dolores, sweet lady, she did not want to leave the bosom of her family down there on Aquia Creek in Stafford, Virginia. And Kurt said, well, I'm not sticking around. And so he took off. And he headed out to California and hung around with Bruce for a while. So he and Bruce were in close proximity with each other for a number of years down there in Southern California. And that's where he met his third wife, Lynn, and then is where he met his fourth wife, Patricia. And, that's what he did a lot, was meeting new wives. But so he was bouncing around job to job, had some, but he was, again, like I said, he was always get in a position and want to move forward. And at that time, Bruce was just, doing his thing down there. He was fixing cars and had a gas station, and he was doing other stuff. And, again, Kurt was trying to score the big one. And that was kind of his downfall there.
Yeah.
And that was in the 70s. And in 74 is when I went to OTS in the Air Force, and I went to flight school in Sacramento. So I had some little interaction with them for about a year, which is 74, 75, 76 timeframe, that I had a little bit more interaction with them directly. And then I went off to Japan with my family, and they were banging around, and that was kind of and telephones were not like they are today. There was no internet. I know you don't believe that, but trust me.
We remember.
We remember.
Yes, we're old enough for that shit.
Yeah.
We didn't have cell phones.
Yeah.
So that is Kim, the revealing thing for me then is, maybe it's confirming, because Dylan's time frame may have helped with this, but so clearly then he connected with my mother when he was, I'm assuming, married to Dolores, because if Dolores's family is ensconced in Stafford, Virginia, I was born in Fredericksburg. That's where I was born, and I was raised in Spotsylvania. So my mom's family was really from that Fredericksburg area. So that's the little light that's been shed for me, like, okay, that's the right timing, that's the right location, because I think for Dylan, couldn't quite figure out where people geographically were. So that's a gap that you just filled for me.
Right. Yeah. Did you spend much time in Fredericksburg?
Oh yeah. I mean, so my youngest, until I was about 5, we lived in like the Stafford, Fredericksburg area. And then we moved to Spotsylvania, and then that's where I grew up mostly.
County is right across the river from Fredericksburg.
Yeah.
So you were spitting down.
Oh,
So
yeah.
anyway, and then, okay, that was through the 70s. And then in the 80s, they send me from Okinawa, Japan to the very, very northern tip of Maine. You're closer to Canada than you are the United States up there. And it's miserable weather up, absolutely miserable. And so I spent 3 years there, and I had a little bit of interaction there. That was when Kurt was in, the time frame was 78 through 81 for me. That's when I left Loring and went to England. And so while I was up there at Loring, Kurt was I think he was in Dallas at the time, and he was working for some guy selling marketing franchises. And so this guy who was marketing franchises with them owed Kurt and his buddy about $1 million. And back in the early 80s, $1 million was really worth something.
Yeah.
And so it was on that $1 million obligation that they started working on setting up their own little franchise business. And it was going to be Precision Tune, I think, or Dynatune, whatever. And I did little graphics works for him and stuff like that. And he said, "Oh yeah, we're going to pay you. We're going to pay you." And of course, he never did. And he was also going to have me open up a training center for people who were getting the equipment and the franchises. They were going to come to Las Vegas because everybody loves to come to Las Vegas. And that's where we were going to locate the thing. And I was going to be running that. You know, I was a shop teacher. I had a bachelor's and master's degree in shop and all that kind of stuff. And so I fit the bill. And Bruce was going to move to Australia and ramrod the franchise operation down there.
Wow.
And they had ordered equipment, and it was crated and sitting on a dock, and they had put money down for buying a filter factory, a factory that makes oil filters and air filters and fuel filters, all that kind of crap for cars. And this way they would have their own brand. It was a big operation. And all of a sudden that guy that owed them $1 million said, "Nah, I'm not going to pay you."
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And what was, I had put in my papers to get out of the Air Force. And that was in 1980. I had put in my papers to get out of the Air Force to do that for him. And all of a sudden we were going along and getting closer to my date of separation. And I couldn't even find him on the phone.
Wow.
Couldn't run him down. And Bruce had a hard time running him down too. And Bruce had owned this big house in someplace in Southern Cal, someplace just south of LA, down toward Escondido, someplace, Southern California. And, you know, he was doing happy. He had a good bit employment and sources of income. And he was sold all that. He was ready to go. And the whole deal fell through. So that really put a bad taste in Bruce's mouth for a long time.
Wow.
Because screwed him over. And when Bruce told me that, I immediately went down and pulled my papers to stay in the Air Force.
Yeah,
And I told the Air Force, well, if I can, I'll just wait until see where they're going to send me. If they're going to leave me in Loring forever, I'm getting out. If they're going to send me to some rat hole little place that the Air Force has lots of, I'm going to get out. But the slimy bastards turned around and sent me to England. So I stayed in England.
yeah.
And while I was in England, Bruce, I think they were down near Beaumont or someplace at the time. Kurt was down there working I don't know what his position was, but they were doing gray area cars, import cars. Do you know what that is?
No.
That's where they take to import a car into the United States. It has to be meet U.S. safety standards and emission standards.
Right.
Well, what they were doing is they were bringing cars over that were not aimed at the United States market, but they would bring them over and then modify the cars. And this was legitimate.
Was that
at
at
that
Scarab? Was that at Scarab or whatever?
Say again, please.
Scarab?
Scarab.
Yeah, was that Scarab Automotive or something like that? I remember him working for like Scarab and it was like cars or something like that.
Yeah, and they were doing BMWs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they were having trouble getting the technical specs for the cars that were coming over from Europe so that they could then modify them. So he got me to go get some manuals for these things, in English, because I was in England, which would have been better than German or French or something. So I went down and spent a couple of $100 buying these technical manuals and bundled them up and sent them to him at the business address. And your dad never paid me for those because he had quit that business or gotten fired. I don't know which. And so he screwed me over on that one. And but I stuck it out in England until I got there in 81, left in 84. And that's when they sent me to West Berlin and spent 6 years there in West Berlin. And during that time, I went back to Key West once. While I was in England, I went back to Key West once. And so that was the time when I was in England. So that it was that time frame, early 80s that you were down in Key. Yeah. Right. That's when we bumped heads there. Yeah. And while I was in Germany, he was doing all his little shenanigans where he spent his time up here in Tallahassee and other things. And that's when your mother divorced him.
Yeah.
And then from Germany, they sent me to Hawaii. So, and that was in 90. And I wasn't hearing much from or about him other than he was had married Roberta and was producing lots of babies. And at the time they were living in Boston, the Rhode Island.
Oh yeah, they were. Yeah.
Yeah. They were living in Rhode Island and working in Boston. And he found this really, he thought was going to be this, and he did real well. It was with a company that I don't know if they're still around, but they made modems, and it was Zoomtel. But anyway, he was working for them. He had done a real good job, job of creating a service department for people to call up and whine and complain about their equipment. And he set up a real good thing, and he was well respected there. Well, he then got this potential even bigger job in I think it was Cincinnati or Cleveland, someplace in Ohio, to work for a company there. Well, he went there. He told the people off at Zoom that, you guys suck, I'm leaving. And rather than taking a leave of absence, as it were, he told them off and left.
Oh, wow.
So when that job in Ohio fell through, he was going, I got to go back to Boston because that's where my family's living. And Zoomtel didn't want anything to do with him. And Zoomtel spread the word around Boston that you don't want to hire this guy. He's a jerk. And so he was saying like, maybe I've got to get the hell out of this neck of the woods. So he was looking at going back to Dallas with his family. And Roberta says, I'm so happy. I have my family here, or my life is here. I have my church. I have my kids, and the kids are in school and soccer. that kind of crap.
Yeah.
And he says, well, we can't stay. And so she kind of threw him out. Of course, she wanted to stay there also because she was had a thing going with the preacher at her church. And she didn't want to leave that.
Crap. Okay, I got you.
Oh, wow. We didn't hear about that
Yeah.
part, but we knew we would hear new stuff.
Yeah, well, Roberta had a thing to well, anyway, all those Rollins girls did, but that's should I be slinging out dirt like this? Oh my God.
You know what? Here's our
Yes.
disclaimer. Yeah, we'll pause there for a second. Our disclaimer really always is, listen, everybody has their own experience with the story, right? And so to your point, right? Like we only know what we know based on secondhand information, right? Or third hand in this case. Now we know it through you, but you know it through Bruce or someone else because you weren't standing there when it was all happening. So we are
This is your
fully
version.
cognizant, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. This is your version of the experience, and it is not intended for anybody to hear and go, "Oh, that's exactly what happened," because none of us were standing there, right? So it's just simply your perspective of the
Right.
story.
Well, this stuff that I'm talking about in Boston and stuff, I got from Kurt's own lips.
Yeah.
Because he
And
had
that's Kurt's lens, right? That's my point. Is like even you getting it from Kurt is Kurt's version of, right? So,
Yeah.
and again, I'm not discounting any of it, Kim. It's just to acknowledge that we only know what we're told, and so that's all we can talk about, right?
In addition, this is really educational for us because we didn't get to experience any of that with him. And again, this is your truth based off of your experience through it. So they've all, everybody's had their chance to, say what their version is, and we've been corrected on timelines and stuff like that. And we're here for it, because this is just a learning experience for us. And
Amen.
and we appreciate everybody's view because we are very objective. We are very open-minded. We're both coaches. So we get that. And we want that because my bias was my bias because of my mother. And then when I got to spend some time with Kurt, when I was 18 years old, I got his perspective and it was much different than my mother's. And
Yeah.
other things that happened in my life, those puzzle pieces started clicking together and going, oh, that's when she lied to me that for the 1 billionth time and said it was this, it was actually this, and so it's therapeutic for me, quite honestly, because I like storytelling and I like all of those things. I'm sitting here smoking my weed, listening to all the stuff that my dad has done. And it's funny because when you say that he went in and wanted to be the top dog, and so I have that mentality, but I do I do all of the work. I'll climb that ladder but I'm going to show you that I'm climbing the ladder because I'm bringing you along with me because I'm also a great leader. And so it sounds like that he was also that type of person, but maybe didn't input the things that he needed to complete the cycle, So now I know, like, okay, I'm like my dad, but better.
Well,
Yeah.
and honestly, Jane, the other thing, again, another clarifying point for me was, I feel like from Dylan, we got some of the California backstory, of course, because he was there with Bruce, and obviously Dylan was there too. And so that was what you revealed, Kim, though, was that story about like the franchise business and the person who owed them $1 million and he was going to, like, that's all, it all sounds like that was the closest he got to the quick payoff, right? But he was also putting in the work to design it, make something happen, and build something, so much so that you were ready to leave the military to go be a part of it. And then it backfired, something that was out of his control, right? The original person just opted not to pay. And so all of that fell apart. Like I can only imagine how crushing that must have been for him in terms of getting that far down the road and so that's an angle, like you said, Jane, that we had not heard. That level of detail and understanding of that whole time period was something that's brand new to us. So I really this is so great.
Yeah. And the fact that you guys were so connected when we were so disconnected, and so being able to fill in the gaps is really cool. So we appreciate this so much.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the things that Kurt did was he was kind of a hooligan, but like that friend things, like you say, they really did nail it because they did such a good job figuring out how to sell franchises when they decided to do their own. And they had it worked out. It was such a good plan that both Bruce and I were ready to, change directions on a dime to
Wow.
support it.
That's
So,
awesome.
and I thought, and nothing else like that ever came his way again. Maybe if he had stuck it out with Zoomtel in Boston, he might have done well. But
Sure.
and then that time he went out when he was, anyway, he ended up in Florida in the early '90s, mid '90s, whenever it was, living at grandma's house. Of course, he had his first strokes while he was in Boston,
Oh,
and
okay.
they weren't debilitating. About the only thing noticed is he had slurred speech,
Right.
even when he was sober. So he, but then when he came down to to Melbourne, Florida, where mom and dad were living, he wasn't doing real well with stuff. But then I guess it was in 90, well, sometimes in the early 90s, he got a job offering out there in the company was in Silicon Valley, San Jose or someplace. And they were thinking about moving their whole corporate office up to Reno because the cost of doing business was so great in the San Jose area that they could give everybody huge raises and still be saving money. And so he went to Reno to help scout out the area and help plan the area to help them move, to say, hey, here's an office building that's empty, here's a whatever that's vacant and near the major trunk lines for fiber optics and all this kind of crap, the stuff that they would need. And that's when he had another stroke. And that was, yeah, that was a big one because the company hadn't heard from him a couple of days. He was in this motel, and Bruce and Lynn had not heard anything from him. So they literally went over there to the room and found him.
Oh, wow.
And packed him up and shipped him back to Florida. Anyway, he was just, it was basically over for him.
Yeah.
And that was in the mid '90s.
That was
And
97 because I was 18 and I had received a phone call from grandma, and she said that he had had a stroke and he's now using a walker. And she was like, I'd really love for you to come out and see your dad because he's not doing very well and he would love to see you. And
yeah,
so I did, and I went out there for I think a full week. And yeah, it was really sad because he could barely talk and he couldn't walk. He had a walker, and his speech was very slurred. He could barely, write. So I would, talk to him, and then, we would get him to write something, and then, and some words he could say, but it was very hard to see because I remember dad when I was little, and he was big and strong and tall and, all of those things. And to see him so frail, it was really sad.
yeah. And that was the time that my dad was starting to deteriorate.
Yes. At the same
So
time.
here's mom, who's 5'2.5" and weighing 115 pounds, is trying to
Right.
throw these two mooses around and pick them up on the floor and all that kind of crap. They had fallen so often, and she would call 911, and the local fire department would come over to pick them up off the floor. They finally said, Mrs. Doxy, here's our private number to the fire station.
Oh, wow.
You don't have to make 911 calls anymore. Just call us up. And they had her, the telephone would ID that it was, Jane Doxy on Pebble Creek. And they'd say, oh, has the colonel fallen down again?
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
And they would come around with their smaller truck, no sirens, no lights, no nothing, just drag them around and pick her up. But that was about the time that mom was able to get Kurt into that VA home.
Yeah. The
Florida,
nurse home.
not federal VA.
Yeah.
And get him in that one up there in Daytona. And he just deteriorated to down into a wheelchair. And he was, when Dad died, we took his dad's power chair up there to him, and he was so debilitated he couldn't really drive it very well. And so they said they took it away from him because he said he used to keep crashing into things and into people and all that. And he was, of course, a lifelong smoker.
Yep.
Until at home, where he could not get out onto the porch, the screened-in porch, because you could not smoke inside the facility. So he had to get out onto the porch and smoke out there. And it got to the point where he couldn't get out to the porch by himself and couldn't light his own cigarettes. So that's at the point he quit smoking. And then it kind of went downhill from there.
Yeah.
And then it was March of 2007 that he finally died, but that was it. What else?
Wow. I mean, Kim, honestly, like, we can't tell you, Jane will speak for herself, but every time we have a conversation with somebody else in this family, it's so enlightening, right? Like, so much, just like we said a few minutes ago, of what you just shared brought clarity to kind of things that had been, almost hinted at before, not hinted as in secret, but hinted as in like, I think this was happening, but I'm not really sure. You just gave us a great deal of clarity, even toward the end there, right? Because Jane knew, of course, and was able to say he'd had some strokes, but the story of like having the initial stroke that wasn't very bad, but then the second one where he was actually alone in a hotel room, that, never even having known the man, that kind of breaks my heart a little bit, because I can only imagine how terrifying that is. And God knows if they hadn't gone looking for him, right, he might not have survived that one. So so that's, I mean, thank you for sharing all of that. And I think it's interesting for me, because here's kind of a follow-on question for me, and it really is more about better understanding the dynamics of the Doxy family. Every family has such unique dynamics, right? And even that idea of family means something a little bit different to different people. But as I think about you all as the 4 children, right? 5 with Sabrina, right? Once she was adopted. Do I have that right?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. So as 5, right, living all over the country, obviously, once you've grown, you being in the military, so all over the world, how much of a connection did you have through your mom and dad, like through the maternal and paternal grandfather? Like, how much connection did you all kind of have over, like, were there certain things that you always did together, or times that you tried to get together, or once everybody left, did everybody just kind of go in their own separate way, and then it was your mom who really just kind of shared information and made connections, or what have you? I'm super curious about that.
Well, we never had any big family reunions or anything like that, because, like you say, we went off. Brother Jan, he, right out of high school, he was planning on going to the University of Hawaii and studying music, specifically voice. Just aside, he and I were both in the elite singing group at our high school.
Oh,
We were
wow.
both second bass sections, and Jan, I was always like in his shadow, so to speak. And so I was always not real confident about my voice performance. And then 30, 40 years later, I ran into our choral director, and he says, "You were better than your brother."
Oh my God.
And I thought, if he had said that to me 30 years earlier, it would have made a big difference in my life. Sure.
Right. Sure.
But anyway, Jan was planning on going to the University of Hawaii, studying voice, and he had a real solid girlfriend, her Chinese girl. Her name was Suzanne Chi, and they broke up. And Jan just said, "Screw this," and he went and enlisted in the Army. And he said, "This way I can get GI Bill benefits and go to the college wherever I choose to go and all that jazz."
Right.
Well, and so the last time, I might have a copy of it someplace. The last picture we had of all of us, all four boys, Sabrina and mom and dad together. We were living in quarters at Quantico.
Oh, wow.
Bruce was in the Army because he had been drafted, and Kurt was in the Navy, and Jan had just enlisted in the Army, and I was still running around in high school. And there's a picture someplace of that. I'll try to post it if I can
That
find
would
it.
be amazing. Yeah, I know. I would love to see that. That'd be really amazing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was in 1966. The last time we were all together at one group alive. And then Bruce went off and did his thing, and in the Army, and ended up in Fort Silly, Oklahoma, with Avril. And then when he got out of the Army, he went to Southern California, and pretty much been out there in California forever since then.
Right.
And then Jan ended up not much longer because he could read, write, and cipher, so he was officer material in the Army, and they sent him to OTS, and immediately sent him to, shortly thereafter sent him to Vietnam. He was killed in February of 68. Yeah. So I was still in high school at the time.
Wow.
And let's see. After that, again, Bruce and Kurt were out there in Southern California in close proximity with each other for a number of years. And, after I went to college, my bachelor's and for my 2 master's degrees I did right here at Florida State in Tallahassee. And then I tried being a public school teacher for a couple of years. And I thought, well, this is really a stupid thing to do.
Janice.
Yeah.
What?
Janice is an educator and used to be a principal.
Yeah. Talking about, the unions were starting to come in and trying to come in. And I was a teacher with a master's degree in one of the best paying counties in the state of Florida, Key West, Monroe County. And when I quit that and got in the Air Force as a second lieutenant on flying status, my salary doubled. Plus I had full medical dental for me and my children, my family. So yeah, it's a much better deal. And I didn't have to put up with, there were a lot of losers in the teaching profession. You get really, really sterling people, but then you get these losers I'm
gonna have to, just for really quickly, for a public service announcement, go ahead and acknowledge that is true in all professions. It's not
yes.
Okay, continue.
Yeah. On that line, there's an old saying, turds always float to the top of the punch bowl. And you get these people that again, there's a lot of good, hardworking, conscientious people, but there's just enough that really turned me sour on it. And it was also during that time when you can't do anything with the children. They can rip things apart and tear things apart and kill each other, and there's nothing, you can't even break up a fight, that type of thing.
Right.
Oh, sorry. No. I get what you're saying. And don't get me wrong. Like, I totally also get that, like you said, you had these opportunities. And so, and in the end, it all worked out for the best for you. So I'm looking now at, we have about a little over 10 minutes left in this, what we hope will be, Kim, the first of many conversations, not all recorded, right?
Okay.
But I wonder then, you've got me just thinking about family in general, and obviously with your brother Jan dying so young, and if I remember correctly, you said he enlisted, right? And then he was, once he was trained in his particular area, he was shipped off to Vietnam versus being drafted, which I think you said Bruce was drafted. Do I have that right?
Correct. Bruce was drafted in 60. I don't know whether it was 66 or 67. It was around that time frame. Jan enlisted in 66, and went through some training and did some stuff. And then they sent him to officer candidate school.
Right. And
So,
then he went to Vietnam, of course.
yeah. And so he was a first lieutenant when he died.
Okay.
Um,
So that,
so
with him passing away so early, that idea that the last picture you all have as a family is in the late 60s.
yeah, 6.
So my husband and I have 6 kids between us. We've both been married previously. And I just think about, there's, having come from a family experience myself that was so incredibly dysfunctional, it's been really important to me, right, to be the person for now, right? Eventually, hopefully one of our children will take over, but to be the person for now who is so intentional about making sure that we are all together, right? At least our goal has actually been, since we've been married, every couple of years, because our kids range in age from 16 to 31. So we have to be really intentional, and they're spread all over the country, about how we get them, in the same space every couple of years. So it's just it's always so fascinating to me, right? To think about how different family dynamics are. And some of it's generational, some of it's just the time period we were in, some of it's, like you said, there's so many reasons for that to be the case. So it's really just fascinating. And even just in the kind of scope of, what it looks like, if you will, to be family, to hear the story.
Well, we, to go back a generation, when we were kids, we were fortunate enough to be stationed a couple of times near in Northern Virginia, where most of my mother's family was. And so we had aunts and uncles and scores of cousins that used to get together all the time and carry on. And, a grandma there. And she drew, what did she drink? She drank Ram's Head Ale. She was a drinker. And she she lived in this little house, and it hadn't been updated since the 30s or something, the 20s. And she had this window over the sink, and she used to take her empty beer cans and throw them out the window because they fill up the trash can too fast. So
wow.
bring them out the window. And she had a nice backyard with apple trees and a mulberry tree. And the grandkids would come around. She said, "Go pick up the beer cans in the backyard, put them in the big trash can." So,
oh my gosh, that's fantastic.
That's funny.
Memories. But and then the down in the Keys, we had aunts and uncles that moved down to the Keys. So we have been traveling through the Keys for since the 50s to visit with them. And so we had a pretty close connection with them, but not much with Dad's family, because they were all ensconced up there in Michigan, and we never were near them. So it was only when we were traveling back and forth across the country from one post to the next did we encounter them. So I really don't have any memory.
Yeah.
Very, very vague memories of
but I love that, like you said, as young kids, you guys had that opportunity to be with family. It really was but once you became, adults, that you became more spread out. So I have one final question that I want to pose, and then Jane, obviously, create space for you to do the same if you have something. But Kim, I'm sitting here thinking to myself, so you had intermittent contact and times where you were closer to our dad than others, big chunks of time when you weren't, some chunks where you were. And so I'm super curious about, like, how to your knowledge, again, this is you making some assumptions, if you will, based on your conversations with him over the years, and knowing that it's been a long time since those conversations happened, since he passed away so long ago. But I just wonder about, like, how he spoke to you about his kids, right? He had kids by that time, like, across multiple wives all over the country. Like, did he see them as like a collective unit? Was he only focused on the I hate to say it this way, but the kids who were in front of him at the moment, and wasn't really, like, attending to, if you will, the kids who weren't? I'm just super curious about that. And so I don't know if you can shed light or not. And if you can't, that's totally okay, but it's worth an ask.
The impression I get when the way you ask that question is pretty much who's standing in front of me right now.
Yeah.
And I think you probably Jane, you probably remember that he was a pretty nice dad when he was there.
Yeah. Yeah, he
and
wasn't he wasn't yeah. I have a story of when he wasn't very nice, but he definitely favored Devin over Jason and I. And so Jason and I definitely got the repercussions from that. But uh he wasn't terrible, and I have several fond memories with him. It's just spending time together. I don't
yeah,
remember him doing things with us or anything like that, but just being at home. He loved wrestling, like the WWF wrestling. And so I
yeah,
remember sitting on the couch with him watching wrestling, and he enjoyed it. And as he chain smoked cigarettes and drank Pepsi, like I don't remember him being like a drinker or anything like that. But I know that he was, definitely a force to be reckoned with if he was upset. I mean, he was intimidating, that's for sure.
yeah,
Um, and I do have an instance where he was pretty abusive towards me because I was supposed to be responsible for Devin, and I was 5 and Devin was 4. So it wasn't a
uh,
good experience. But, you know, uh, but that being said, I feel like he was a good dad. Like, I don't remember him being crazy, or anything like that. And I think it really helped because my mother was so crazy. So it balanced it out. But because once he was gone, oh God, she was a totally different person, and that's when I really started noticing that she had problems. So um yeah, he wasn't
yeah.
bad.
But he never really talked about his other children from other marriages.
No, no, he never. I didn't know I had other siblings until after he left. And then I heard about Jan and Sarah and stuff like that. But those are the only two that I knew about. And then once I went to Florida, to see him, I then realized how many kids he had with Bobby, and stuff like that, and how young they were. And I was like, oh wow. So, but it was mostly grandma telling me, she was the one she was the glue. She kept tabs on everything that Kurt did, if she feels like, and so she always knew the birthdays she always kept everybody connected. And that's what I really appreciated about hers, because she was my only connection
Yeah,
to my father, who I was told was no longer my father, and I had to call my stepdad dad, and that was and if we didn't, we would be in a lot of trouble. And so, we got brainwashed into thinking that he was, the Antichrist or whatever, and that we were told we could not have any contact with him until after we turned 18,
yeah,
and that he wasn't our dad anymore. And so, we were brainwashed by my mom and my stepdad, and that sucked, and I remember how it felt. And then to sit and wonder, like, does he think about us? Does he want to get us? All of those things, because we were in a really shitty situation with my mom. She was super abusive, very mentally ill, would make very emotional decisions and stuff. And it was just like, okay, so he doesn't care, and we're left with a psycho, and that's how it felt.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well,
And that's one of those, the kinds of things that there'll never be resolution around, right? Because the only
Yeah,
person to bring resolution is obviously Kurt himself. So,
right.
so I'm listening to you talk, Jane, and I am thinking this to myself, right? This has all been a little surreal for me, right? And it is fascinating to realize that, 12, there are 12 or 11, um, for me, 11 half siblings out there. Obviously Jason has passed away,
Yeah.
but to think about the scope of that, and my experience, of course, I grew up in a crazy and dysfunctional family, very unsafe environment, and literally, quite literally, walked away from that maternal biological family as soon as I could, right? When I left for college. College was my way out. And so, and with the exception of a cousin, right? One cousin who I connected with later on in life as an adult, I have zero connections there. And so what I do value about all of this is that, like a lot of families, there's a lot of craziness here in terms of genuine, right, mental health issues, but also in terms of just the, you know, dynamics and the story across all these decades. And so I appreciate kind of coming in after the fact, right? Because coming in after the fact, Jane, to your point, like you live with that, right? You live with those memories and those experiences, the good and the not so good. And for me, it's really about just being able to, you know, kind of recognize what a gift it is to step back and say, you know, okay, because of Kurt, you know, even though like the only thing he did was, you know, take the genetic act that it takes to make a baby, right? But because of that, you know, now 35 years later, right? I have Jane in my life, I have Devin in my life, Kim now, hopefully I have you in my life. And it doesn't, for me, it's like the stories before that don't have necessarily or near the amount of weight as the potential stories we can kind of write together moving forward. So that's something I'll be grateful for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. And for me, this has been a really cool experience because again, like I said earlier, this is all the stuff that was in between that, you know, was through the lens of my mother, who obviously had, you know, an agenda and spewed nothing but negativity and everything about our father and ill will and the family, and they don't even care and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, you know, when you're surrounded by that all the time, you do have those negative thoughts like, okay, they just don't care. You know, we're stuck in this shack with no electricity and barely eating and eating at homeless kitchens and just dealing with all of this stuff. And, you know, thinking that nobody cares. And I knew that grandma always did, you know, but I didn't know if Kurt did or not. And once I got to see him again, it was like some of those things, like I said, the puzzle pieces clicked together and I'm like, oh, okay. The reason why we moved from California wasn't because what my mom said, how family members were trying to poison us. It was Kurt found us and they skipped town. And so we moved from, you know, living in a little shack in a canyon in California in Los Gatos on my uncle's property to central Phoenix, Arizona, where it's the temperature is totally different. The people are totally different. And it was just a total shell shock for us. And we were so angry because we were so happy. And we were finally happy in that little spot. And then my mother tells us all this stuff. And then I find out after I'm 18 that it was him that found us and we were running from him. And I was just like, wow. Okay. You know, my mom really worked hard at keeping us away from him. And he did. He was like, I found you and sent, he's like, he sent a letter or something like that. And then the next thing he knew, we were gone and everything, all the traces were erased. So, you know, it just hearing these different stories and how he was as a person is very, very enlightening, but also, you know, confirms a lot of things for me and how I am, because I didn't get to really know him like that. And so, like I said earlier, like we're very similar, and that explains why I'm not like my mother so much, you know, and I appreciate that. My God, I appreciate that. But you know, it's cool to hear that because I'm like, oh, cool, I'm like my dad, you know, and that's where I get it from. So it's bittersweet.
And even the best parts, right? Because I love how you framed it earlier that like, okay, so I have that same drive, and you and I have talked about that a lot. I think we both very much have that, but are willing to do the work to, you know, climb the ladder, to, you know, show the value and get there and earn it, so to speak, versus the, you know, the quick win or the quick, you know, big payoff or whatever.
Right. And you know what's funny is I work with people, I coach people that want that, you know, instant gratification. And I have to, I'm the voice of reason with them and go, okay, how is that really going to work? And blah, blah, blah. So it's almost like I'm coaching my dad at this point. You know, like I'm coaching people that are like my father because I see the difference, you know, or whatever, and know how to do it. And I coach them through, I coach business owners through that stuff all the time. I did it this week and it felt so freaking good because you know, that's my true calling. And I love coaching business owners and stuff like that and getting them to see, you know, beyond their nose and open up their mind to that. And it isn't just instant gratification. You actually have to put in the work and have expectations and accountability and follow up and close the loop and all of those things. And so it sounds like that's the stuff that he was missing in some instances, but then figured it out towards the end and then came to the demise of his smoking habit, you know,
Yep.
and it sounds like he did get it fucking figured out finally. And then it was just a little too late for him, you
Too late.
know?
Exactly.
And I feel that, and I'm like, well, wow, I can carry on, you know, that and teach other people how to do that. And that's what I'm here for. So it's super cool to see how it's kind of like linking together, you know?
I like
So
that. Yeah, I like that a lot. So I'm gonna do what I do best and bring us kind of to a close. Because what we know is that you push past a little bit an hour and people start to tune you out a little bit. So we're gonna save future conversation for future conversation. But so Kim, I'm gonna give you the last word. And what I mean by that is to say, like, you know, given the nature of the conversation that we've just had today, right? If there's one, and I'm thinking we'll end it on a super positive note, like if there's whether it's a characteristic, if it's a something that when you think about your brother Kurt, our father, and you kind of have a smile on your face, like you think fondly about it, like I said, characteristic or whatever, what would it be? What's that one thing about him?
Huh. I don't know. Um,
That was a setup.
okay, hold on. Or I have a secondary question.
Okay, good.
The secondary question would be what was something you learned about Kurt and or Janice and I that you can link to Kurt or something like that?
well, I was thinking back to the first question is that when I was smaller, he was good to me. He was, you know, a lot of
Love
times
kids.
he was a pretty good big brother, and being the tail end Charlie. Now Bruce was too, and so you know I look back on those days and see him but you know Kurt always tried. He always
Yeah.
tried.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. Thank you for that. I feel like that's a great place for us to wrap up. And Jane, I heard you add in there that he loved kids, right? It was
He
never
really
about,
did.
yeah, it was
He
never about
Go ahead, Kim.
Yeah, he did. And he was 7 years older than I, but you know, most of the time when he was out doing his thing that his kid that much older was doing, but you know, around me, he was pretty good.
Love it. That's so great. That's a great place to wrap up. So Kim,
Yeah.
again, thank you. And so all of you who tuned in to listen to this episode, we hope you enjoyed meeting our Uncle Kim as much as we did. Well, at least I met him, and reconnecting, obviously, Jane and Kim.
Yeah.
And we, you know, we love that you guys continue to be on this journey with us. So thanks so much for tuning into this episode and digging a little bit deeper into the dumpster that is the Doxy family, because every family has their dumpster. So thank you for listening. Obviously, like and follow and subscribe and share. Jane, final word.
That's it. All the stuff that Janice just said, I echo that.
I love it. All right. Peace out, guys. We'll see you next time.
Bye.